This is John Martinka, and welcome to another edition of the Getting the Deal Done podcast series. Today, my special guest is my friend Suzan Sturholm with All Things HR, my go-to outsourced or fractional HR company to help small, mid-sized businesses make sure they're doing everything right in a very regulated world of employment. Welcome, Suzan.
Thank you, John. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about how you got started with All Things HR.
We've been in business now 18 years, and really, truly, when I got started at All Things HR, I was really thinking this would be a one-woman show. I had my daughter was in fifth grade at the time, and I wanted to be more of a mom and still work. And before I knew it, it within 6 months I was hiring employees, and it was like it took me a few years to realize, oh my gosh, I think I have a company, as I kept adding more and more employees to the payroll. So as you said, we provide outsourced human resource management services to small to mid-sized clients. That small client we define as anything under 100 employees, because usually those are the companies that really don't need a full-time HR manager on staff. They just need assistance. They can't afford, a certified HR manager to be on their team. And so we're a good fit because we're like attorneys, we charge by the hour, and you only pay for the time that you use us for. So it's been a great ride, 18 years. I have 21 employees now, and just very, very proud of the team that we've created at All Things HR.
So you very quickly got into position of where your clients are. All of a sudden, you got half a dozen employees and growing. You got the same issues as the people you're counseling.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So I have felt the pain. I've gone through it myself, and continue to go through it. I mean, one of the things I know we'll be talking about is staffing challenges. All Things HR has staffing challenges too. We're just like everybody else. And just because it's our area of expertise doesn't mean that, the economy and the effects of hiring people doesn't apply to us. A lot of people think that we have the special sauce. Not sometimes we do, but a lot of times, no, we're going through the same pain as everybody else.
Yeah. Well, let's start in with staffing challenges and, what's going on in that for, again, these the small, mid-sized businesses. And by the way, what you just said about, 100 employees in that, what I hear all the time is, well, my wife handles the AR and the AP and the HR. And the book, the receptionist does our HR. And I shake my head and going, I'll bet you are out of compliance. And
yeah, that's something common that we hear. I think HR is still perceived as the secretaries, the paper pushers, if you will. And we're not. You're good HR professionals. We're certified. We have many years of experience. We are constantly going to conferences and seminars to keep ourselves up to date on the various laws of the land, both federal and state. I think, here in Washington state, we are very, very pro-employee, and we have a lot of laws for our employees and our employers to be in compliance with. And it's hard to keep up with. And I think that a lot of times the small employer, including the big employer, they make the mistake of, it can't be that difficult. It can't be that hard. And they don't know, actually, there's all these little minute laws that are attached to the majority of things that we do. Yeah. And you have to be informed of that. So,
well, I digress there. Let's talk about staffing challenges in the marketplace these days and what you are seeing.
Absolutely. So staffing challenges, no secret, everybody's still struggling. Even though the recent layoffs have put some people back into the workforce, we're still finding the good talent is hard, including for us here at All Things HR. It's just, you have to make sure when you start recruiting, you're giving yourself plenty of time to look for the right candidate. the candidates these days, they have a lot of asks. They have a lot of asks, and they're almost non-negotiable sometimes. So employers are in a position where they really need to pursue what I call the hidden workforce. Okay, you go back and you find retirees. We are finding more retirees are wanting to come back. They left during the pandemic, maybe a little bit earlier than they wanted to, and now they're coming back again. Prices continue to soar, the economy. So, be mindful that there's a lot of retirees that want to come back. Caregivers, believe it or not, people who have been in prison, they're looking for gainful employment, and they want a second chance. And we see a lot of employers going out there and providing that opportunity. And then the other thing that we always should have been looking at and considering is, for years and years, we've put such a high value on finding candidates with degrees, master's degrees or things like that. And really, truly, for the majority of work we do, and I'm talking this in general, does a degree really need to be had to perform this job, this X job? And the answer usually is no. So we're finding more employers opening the doors to people who don't have degrees, or maybe they just have AAs or something like that. And, they're being creative on who they bring on board. And employers are having to recognize that they're going to have to really develop more internal training programs for their employees. Training programs as it pertains to their culture, as it pertains to the handbook policies, but also in regards to the actual job themselves. Individual managers really truly need to create a better onboarding program. There needs to be a better mentoring program put in place. And then again, training people to fill the gap that they have with talent. And so it's looking internally, how do we make the most of what we have and broaden the skill set of the people that we have, versus counting on hiring more people to come into the organization, because that continues to be the struggle. It's again, it's loosened up a little bit from the Great Resignation, but it's nonetheless, it's still hard to find the right quality candidate.
I completely agree on that. On two things, I've read some things. Alan Weiss has written a lot of books on advisory stuff, and he's written one on, I think it's called Fourscore and something. It's about, we tend to ignore people once they hit 60 or so, and yet they have just as much or more to offer. And studies have shown, as you get older, you're not really losing it. You have as much brain power as someone half your age. And that is a lot of talent. And then you talk about degrees, Susan, and I think about teachers, and I love teachers. My mother was a teacher, but a bad teacher gets a master's degree, they're going to get paid more than a great teacher that doesn't have that degree.
Exactly. My daughter's a teacher too, and it's, yes, absolutely. It's so the degree does not necessarily mean they're going to be a stellar employee and that they know it all, or they have the bandwidth to handle multiple projects. I think we've in the past put too much weight on that, instead of really looking for the right candidate with the overall skill set to perform the job. And too many employers, I hate this phrase. They say, I need to hire somebody who can hit the ground running. I hate that phrase. And the reason why is, it means to me, you don't want to train this person. You don't want to spend time with them. You want to put them down in front of a computer and a desk and say, go. And that is absolutely unfair. You got to train them to your policies, your procedures, the way you do things, customer service expectations. And then you need to help them grow and expand in their position themselves to keep them happy and keep them there, to retain them. So anyway, it continues to be a challenge. I always like to tell people, if you're feeling that pain still, yep, we all are. It continues to be a challenge, and it probably will be for quite some time.
Yeah. So let's shift. I mean, some of the things that's been in the news a lot lately is DEI, and it took off like a rocket ship. And now we're seeing some companies just saying, hey, we're going to step back a little bit on that.
Yes.
What's going on with that, and how does it affect small businesses?
Well, okay, so now we use a new kind of term. You got DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, but then we're adding a B to that for belonging. People really want to belong to the culture. They want to feel like, hey, these are my people. This is where I belong. And so a lot of companies are becoming more aware of that and trying to figure out, how do you help someone belong to this group, to this culture? So there's a whole new approach coming for DEIB. Let me just pause for a second. We saw, after George Floyd, we saw this huge power come in and take over. And that's not what I wanted to say. We just see a number of organizations embracing DEI and wanting to do what they could to bring in a more diverse workforce and to really apply more equity and inclusion, right? And then now I would say in the last year, it's kind of coming down a little bit. And there's a lot of theories. No one knows quite for sure, but there's a lot of theories on why that happened. And a lot of it had to do with too many employers just jumped right into DEI, and they didn't do the research. They didn't hire the right people to take the lead on their DEI programs. And what happened is a lot of programs failed. A lot of employee relations issues were created from it. I mean, we ourselves saw so many messes, like they would have a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee, and they would choose, they would choose like the receptionist, a person of color who's like the receptionist or an assistant to run that committee. And really, truly, for those committees, you need a high level person who has that training skills. It needs to be an HR person with a specialty in DEI. It's just not something that you put people together and talk about, because what happens is more problems occur, and what you end up finding is you're having more discrimination occurring, and of course you have to address it. So a lot of employers decided it was just becoming too much of a headache, and they wanted to step away from it. Not they didn't believe in it, they just didn't want to deal with the problems that came from it. And that's because they didn't structure it correctly. They didn't choose the right people to facilitate and lead those conversations. So now what we're trying to do in our field is really encourage people approaching DEIB differently. How do you figure out, first of all, you want HR to have a voice, and you want the education. So that's one thing that's not happening that we would like to see, is more education in regards to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And that's separate and apart from, discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. So discrimination, harassment, and retaliation, that's the law. DEI is what you want from your culture. It's who you want to be, how we want to engage with each other. It's not the law. And so lots of education has to be put in place at the various organizations to make sure employees understand this and they're all working from the same page. And then you got to create programs, practices, that you want to incorporate in your organization. Managers need to be trained. And it's a slow process. I think that's the other big miss, was people wanted this to go in place and everything become a wonderful kumbaya situation immediately within a month or two. And that is not a realistic expectation. It took years for us to get here. It's going to take a number of years for us to get to a better place. And you have to be committed to the long-term plan and know that it's baby steps. And again, employers are just impatient. They want to get there and they want employees to sing their praise immediately. And it's not going to happen. It's not realistic.
Yeah. And because you definitely have people who are, let's go full speed ahead on this, and others who are going, wait, I don't know what this means. How can this be good if I don't know what it means?
Well, and then you got the people who don't believe in it, right?
Oh, yeah.
That you got to figure out, how do you incorporate them? How do you bring them along? And you can't shove it in their face. That was the other thing that was happening, is people were feeling like they were getting that shoved in their face and they didn't believe it and they didn't want to take it. And so friction occurred. And it was all because we were going too fast, right? We needed to slow it down a little bit, that approach. And I understand not everybody would agree with that, and that's fine. That's my perception, and a lot of people that I have talked with It's their perception of why, unfortunately, it's kind of cooled down a little bit. Not that it's not still there, not that it's not still needed. It absolutely is that employers just got burned out on the ramifications of their programs, and they didn't want to put the effort back into fixing it because it's a bigger fix.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go something peripheral to that on the belonging part, and that is the employees who want to work remotely, 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 5 days a week, and employers who, and I'll give you an example, and you know the company that does some creative work, and the creative people need to and want to be in the office because that's how they come up with creative or shall we say that's how they let their creativity out to do what their clients need, versus the people who just may write computer code or record things can pretty much do it from anywhere.
Right. And it's different strokes for different folks, right? I mean, really, truly. This is really interesting, and I'm gonna say there's no right way. The right way works best for you and your employees. That's the right way. And we can look at what other companies are doing, and we should, but we really should be really asking our employees, what is it that they need? And then what is it that they want? Two different things, right? People get them blurred, but what is it that you need? And what is it that you want? You know, we're back to our old traffic problems here in Seattle, right? Heck, every time I have to get in my car and drive someplace, I'm rolling my eyes, because you got to add on that commute time, and to be able to commute someplace in a reasonable amount of time, that window has really shrunken down. So it's figuring out what works best for you and your team. So like my team, we're a team of 21. Our consultants all work from home or on site with their clients. And I allow them, I don't want to mess with their schedule. They get to schedule their appointments. And that's so that they can figure out the commute time on their own, and they can schedule it at the right time of the day. I'm looking for the end result. Did they service the client, and did they, in all transparency, meet their billable hours that they are required to meet? That's really truly what I'm looking for. Quality of work, happiness of the client, and then the billable hours. How they get there, I'm treating them as professionals, because they are professionals and they can monitor it themselves. We do come together. So my admin team and we work 2 days in the office, Mondays and Tuesdays. And then once a quarter, we have in-person team meetings. I'll be honest, that's not enough for me. Here I am, the owner of the company, and I want more. Maybe I'm old school. Maybe I mean, heck, right now I haven't got to a project because I don't have a copier machine that prints off, 50 pages. I need to be in the office to do that. I'm missing those things, and I'm missing the ability to just go into somebody else's office and have a quick conversation and discussing things and working things out. But I am the minority. I am definitely the minority, and I have a choice. I can either force everybody back in the office, and I would lose majority of my staff. I am pretty darn sure I would lose, and it would truly hurt me and my ability to recruit others. Or I compromise. And I think that's where we're at. I think we're at a compromise. Employers really need to take a look to see what is it that they want, what do they want, what do their employees want, and what is a compromise. And some of the compromises, and John, you and I were talking about it, is, there's they're over in Europe, they're thinking about, and they've done a lot of pilot testing in regards to 4-day work weeks, right? And it's a 4-day work week, which you get paid for a 5-day work week. So the question is, are they working 4/10s? Some, or are they working 4 8-hour shifts and getting paid for, the 5 days? It's both ways. And people are loving it. It's great. It's fabulous. Companies say it's working for the majority of them, but there's still a lot of things that you have to adjust. It's customer expectations. When is your customer working? When does the customer need to have access to you? So there's a lot there to work out, but that's one way they're tackling this problem, you know. So some people work Monday through Thursday, some people work Tuesday through Friday, some people work the 4 days that include, you know, Friday through Monday. But a lot of different things are being thought out and put into place to see how we can have this better work-life balance or work-life fit for each individual involved. And you know, we were talking a little bit about this, John. You said, but there's so many industries, you know, the majority of the industries are the ones that you have to be there in person, like manufacturing or restaurants or retail. They don't have that option to work remote. And as I shared with you, when you talk to some of those workers, they're a little bit tired of hearing about, you know, the office workers complain about not being able to work from home, because they can't, because of the industry they're in.
Yeah, and then you get into the productivity on 4-day work week. And, you know, we talked about, you know, my simple example is if an employee, if the pricing of the product is based on an employee doing making or packing or whatever, 100 a day, that's 500 a week. And all of a sudden they're working 4/8, you would expect them to do 125 a day, and to keep the pricing to the customers, because then the customers go looking for pricing somewhere else.
It's a challenge. I mean,
Yeah.
but it's not going away. I mean, I don't think any employer should put their head in the sand on this one. This is not going away. You know, the millennials, the X generation, they're coming up, and this is what they need. This is what they want. And they will turn away great opportunities if they don't have all their boxes checked on what they're looking for. So my recommendation on this one is, you know, don't put your head in the sand, know that it's real, and keep asking the question, what is it that your employees want? What is it that they really need? And, you know, you might have to just have a little bit, you know, less structure to your work environment to make it work. And it's not going to be a one shift and that's it, you're done. You're going to shift a number of times. And it's going to take years to find that right mix for your organization. And don't try to be another organization. Try to be you and work with the employees you have. And hopefully you'll get to a happy medium. And it's going to be a compromise for everybody. And that's one thing I think employees need to understand. It's a compromise.
Yeah, and those employees right now have a little more leverage than, say, if unemployment was 6% instead of 3%.
Exactly. Exactly. And yeah, it's just going to be interesting, and there's no signs of this going away anytime soon. I think you're going to still be dealing with this 5 to 10 years from now. I really do, because you have people who have other things going on in their lives. They want to be home for the kids' soccer game. They want to, you know, be home to be with their kids after school, or have the flexibility, you know, to make sure they take their kids to the doctors or whatever it may be. And you have people with no kids who, you know, want to make sure they take the dog to the vet, or they want to, you know, make sure they get their walks in. It's, you know, different strokes for different folks.
Right.
And compromise is key.
You used the term head in the sand. So let's talk about this, in especially regards to business buyers and sellers, wannabe sellers in the next 1, 3, 5 years. The salary threshold, which refers to exempt employees and paying overtime or not paying overtime, right?
Right. And this has been a Washington state law for a number of years. It went into place, I believe, in 2019. And that is where, let me back up a little bit just to make sure everybody understands. So since the 1930s, we've had a law in place called the Fair Labor Standard Act. It's a federal law, and it tells us which positions, not employees, what positions can be salaried and which cannot be. There's a test. There's like a 7-part duties test that you put each position through, and it has to meet these test requirements for it to be deemed a salary position. And then about 5, 6 years ago, because, in all full honesty, because employers abuse this, the Fair Labor Standard Act, they then put in salary thresholds, Washington state being one of the first to do that, where in order for a position to be salaried, you had to pay it a certain amount of, money as a salary for every year. And then it also had to meet the Fair Labor Standard Act's duty test. Okay. So it has to do both, but it starts with the salary. So in Washington State, again, it was put into place in 2020. And for a number of years, we've had the salary range for the employer that has 1 to 50 employees, and that's a small employer. And then we had a salary range for the 51 or more employers. For the first time, now we're coming up, and this has been what the goal is, to get us back all on the same, minimum wage. We all want to have the same minimum wage, and we all want the same salary threshold. So coming up for January, and I'm just checking my little cheat sheet that I have here, but in January of 2024, the salary threshold will be $69,264. So a salary position has to, at bare minimum, be paid on an annual basis $69,264,000. There, I got it out. And this is the same for large employers. Okay. And for a lot of positions, we have a lot of clients going, oh my gosh, I can't pay my receptionist, $69,000 or $70,000. Yeah, we know. And the receptionist probably shouldn't be a salary position. It most likely, I can tell you, the average receptionist position doesn't meet the Fair Labor Standard Act duties test. So we have a lot of clients, and we see it all the time, that because it's a little bit more complex and they don't like it, they're putting their head in the sand about it. Yeah. And it's a huge compliance issue. And then it usually becomes a bigger issue when you're trying to sell your business, because when you go through the due diligence process and you examine all the pieces of the business, including the HR pieces, it's where you're at in your compliance and your structure of your HR department. And if your salaries aren't in compliance, you need to be before they'll sell the business, before they buy the business. And that means you have to engage an employment attorney to work with you on how to get it into compliance, because you want that client attorney privilege so that it's not discoverable should anything, any type of legal action occur. And it's a fairly big problem for a number of employers that they don't like it. They don't like the law. Well, guess what? The federal law is coming up here, and granted, the federal law has a little bit lower salary threshold that they're looking at putting in place, but you're still going to have to meet it. It's going to be still a requirement. And remember, it's whatever is stronger. Is it the federal law or the state law that has the stronger, that's more pro-employee, if you will? And Washington State, we're known for being a very progressive, very pro-employee state. So our laws are almost, rarely do I refer back to the federal law, because most of our laws here in Washington State are just, they're stronger laws.
Now, to clarify, an exempt employee doesn't get overtime.
Correct.
And a non-exempt employee gets anything over 40 hours at time and a half.
Correct. In the state of Washington.
In the state of Washington.
Yeah.
No, and I understand it, because I remember the Wall Street Journal having articles a few years ago about, these fast food places would make a manager earning under $30,000 an exempt employee and work them a lot of hours, and that's basically minimum wage or so. And
well, John, that's the problem. Over the years, we employers, we've abused this. We have so abused it that our government feels that they have no choice to put such a law in place to manage us, so that we don't take advantage of our employees. So that's why it's there.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, but my advice to everyone is, hey, January 1st, it's going up again here in Washington State, just as well as minimum wages. And you want to make sure that you're in compliance, and you have to be at. So like I said, the salary threshold is 69, what did I say? 69,264. So you can't pay them 69,000. if you want to round it, you're going to round it to 69 and 69.5 or 70,000. You can't pay them under the threshold, even though that threshold is not an even number. So
yeah, no, I get it. And you know, I think for every company that you know, maybe doesn't know and or purposely abuses this, there's probably 3 or 4 that are saying, look, we want our employees working 8 hours and having a life and being fresh when they come back tomorrow.
agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. And understand, employees are getting so savvy these days. So savvy. And that's good and bad. I mean, part of it is they know what laws that employers need to be in compliance with as it affects them. Most employees know about the salary threshold. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, they're wise, and that's what their expectation is to be, you know, treated fairly.
So let's get into more compliance things. You know, this is very important in my world of buying and selling companies, is the HR. And as I said, you know, in the days where, you know, you say you're old school. Well, in the old school, it would be your team has to be, say, someone like me, a banker, an attorney, an accountant. And now I'm telling both sides, you need an HR person. If you're selling, you need to make sure there's nothing that can be uncovered, because it's going to kill a deal, drive the price down, add costs. It's very similar in the accounting world. Companies that do business in multiple states, with the Nexus, had a client earlier this year, and all of a sudden they discovered, no, we're not paying the sales tax and other stuff in these states. And it was, you know, it's like 300 minimum. They figured it would be a minimum $350,000 they were going to owe. And the same thing can happen with HR if you're not doing it the right way. So,
absolutely.
Now we just talked about the salary threshold, wage and hour laws. Talk about those, and it's tied into the job, when your jobs are posted, what you have to disclose, etc.
Yeah. And first of all, one of the things I would want to say to anybody considering buying a business is do an HR audit of that company. Bring in an outsourced HR person, somebody who's objective, to do a full audit of your HR department, because how organized, how structured that HR department is, that says a lot of the health from an HR standpoint of that company. So I always recommend starting with that first, because that's where so much is disclosed. And that's when we bring on clients, that's where we start, is with the HR audit. It's a version of a blood test, if you will. But one of the things that we're looking at is, you know, again, the wage and hour laws. So do we have a good timekeeping system in place? And now, really, truly, since most payroll companies have a really good timekeeping, there's so many different ways you can keep time. That one is usually fairly easy to be in compliance with the exception of, we still find people, hourly employees, not taking their breaks or their lunches, or employers recording this, right? So you have to record the lunch break, but the 10-minute, 15-minute break, employers not recording. It's not required of them. I highly highly recommend that there is some type of tracking for breaks, because you run into the problem where an employee says, I never get my breaks, never, ever. And the employer is going, yes, you do. And then you have, the plaintiff attorney or a judge saying, well, prove it that they got the 10-minute break. How do you prove it? You can't. So that's why you want good systems and processes in place to track these things.
Suzan, let me interrupt. The 10-minute break? Give us the details on that. How many a day? How many per shift, etc.?
Well, at a high level, so I'll do this at the high level. It's basically, a 10-minute break for every 4 hours you work. And at 5 hours, you get the half-hour lunch break. That's a minimum. So the 10-minute break is paid. The lunch break is not paid. And it needs to be at least, again, at the 5-hour mark, it's a half hour. A lot of companies, they schedule you for 9 hours with the idea that you get a 1 hour non-paid break. But that 10-minute break is always paid. And so, and because it doesn't need to be recorded because it's paid, a lot of companies, they just choose not to record that, not have the employees record it, which is not a good practice because you don't have proof, again, that the employee took it. The half-hour break, they do have proof for that.
And this is for hourly employees.
Yes, this is for hourly employees.
For tracking. Yeah. So we have a mutual friend, John Brondello at Time Equipment, and employees can have an app on their phone and they go punch. I took off at 10:20, punch, I'm back in at 10:30.
It's amazing.
And
it's
if they don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I find it hard for people to say that they can't record time correctly these days, because there's so many wonderful things that technology provides us. And yes, John Brondello, Time Equipment Company, does a wonderful job of putting tracking systems in place and keeping time for employees. And then we have Payroll Solutions, Janet Plenzy's, payroll solutions providers, that also does a fabulous job of helping you keep in compliance with these type of things. But I think one of the other big mistakes employers make is, and payroll companies make, is that you sign up for the automatic half hour to be taken out of people's, time. The system automatically takes it out. That actually now is becoming unlawful, because the employee has to record that time that they took, and they have to acknowledge that they took that time. The computer can't do it for them. And so we find that to be a common error. We find, that again, with other wage and hour laws and compliance, it's like I said, it's more the tracking and having good records and paying them accordingly. So one of the other big misses that we can talk about it, but like paid family medical leave, paid sick and safe leave time, you cannot tell the employee when they're going to use their paid sick and safe leave time. The employee gets to choose. So we see a lot of employers automatically, assigning sick time to employees who are out sick. And you have to ask them if you're going to use their sick time, not just.
Susan, let me ask you a question about that. What you talked about, the time. I've seen businesses where some of the employees will say, well, yeah, I work 8 to 4:30, half an hour lunch, but I don't take lunch, so I can leave at 4 o'clock. Is that lawful?
Well, it's complicated. So your time can be whatever your time is, right? An employer can choose it. You can work 3 hours and not take a break. You can work exactly 4 hours, and then you need to take that 10-hour break. Or you work 5 hours, you're going to have that half-hour break in there. So it's how you structure your schedules. But a lot of employees think that they can't do it, and that's where the correction is. An employer has to come in and say, well, this is how we make it work for your schedule. So it's complicated, but employees get a mindset of I can't do this, I can't do that. And that's not necessarily true. The schedule could be whatever you want it, just as long as they get the breaks in the right time. And sometimes it's odd to work 5-hour shift means that, either have them work 4 hours and 59 minutes, or if they go over to the 5:01, then they're going to have that half hour in there for that lunch period. And they can't. It has to be taken during the shift. You can't use it to leave early or come in late.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah. So
Can't
I mean,
that.
that's one of the biggest wage and hour violations that we see.
And it's usually the employee who wants to do that, not the company.
Well, and the employer thinks, well, because they want to and we mutually agree, they can do it. And no, that not with this law. In fact, rarely do laws allow that flexibility.
Yeah, so many little traps. Talk about job posting stuff.
Excuse me?
Job posting requirements.
So we have a new job posting law where you need to put in the wage range for the posting, for the position that you're posting. And we are finding that employers are kind of making it up still. They're not putting a lot of effort. First of all, some are not putting the posting, the wage ranges in, and that's unlawful now. You have to put a wage range in, and it has to be the real wage range, right?
Yeah.
So,
right.
If you're at a minimum going to pay $20 for a position because that's with somebody with no experience, but at the maximum, you're going to pay them $30, then that's your wage range that you need to put into that job ad. Not having that information or putting like, $20 plus, that is unlawful. And that is still a common mistake. You also need to make sure that you are including your benefits. And it's not benefits are provided, it's what type of benefits you're going to be providing your employees. You need to put a brief description of what the job is. And a lot of employers are just not in compliance with that. And they need to go back and look at the law. There's lots of education out there. I recommend going to the state's website to see exactly what's required. But yeah, this is what we're seeing as a big mistake, and it can put the company in big jeopardy. There's actually a scam going on right now where employees are applying for the jobs that don't have the compliance in their job postings, and so they apply for the job, and if they don't get selected, they threaten to file a suit against you or bring you, file against you with the Wage and Hour Division unless you pay them $7,000. It's a huge scam that's going on that employers need to be mindful of, and they are targeting those companies that do not have compliance in their ads. So be mindful of this. I mean, and do take some of your job ads and have them be reviewed by an attorney to make sure they're in compliance.
Writing that down, that is some, people will find a way to try to cheat anything.
Absolutely. It's a big thing going on in Seattle now. It's a really big thing.
Yeah, I had a client of mine down in Tacoma talked last week, and it's similar type of strategy, but someone sued him over his website not being ADA compliant.
Yep, that's another piece, and understand this is all deliberate. That's part of the plan. Yeah. So that's another reason why you want to be in compliance and to protect yourself from that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and actually a good job ad, if you're not getting the quality of candidates that you're looking for or the quantity, a lot of times it does come down that your job as is not well written and it's not providing the candidate with the information they want to see and want to know. So it's a two-parter there.
Let's talk a little bit about all the leave, employee leave programs going on, and then finish up with any kind of complaints and discrimination type stuff. So first of all, employee leave programs in this state. I know there's a lot of them.
Yep, there is. It's a ton. And another reason why when you hire an HR professional, you make sure they have this experience. Really, truly, leaves are taking up about half of HR's time these days because there's so many, and there's so many little details to every law. It really takes experience to know what you're doing. You can't put somebody brand new into the position and expect them to be in compliance. It's not going to happen. But the big one I was talking about is the use of paid sick and safe leave time. Also can be called PTO. PTO is paid sick and safe leave time. And what employers are not understanding is that, you can't require employers to use their PTO time or PSSL time for when they're sick, or, it's their choice. And, there's also, if somebody's out sick for 2 days, you're going to have to wait to the completion of the 3rd day, and you're starting the 4th day before you can ask for the doctor's note. We still see a lot of impatience with clients that want to ask for a doctor's note on the 2nd day or the 3rd day. No, the law is written really weird. It's as you start, it's after you completed the 3rd day and as you start the 4th day, can you ask for a doctor's note? And then the question is, well, how do you deal with attendance problems then for those who call in for the 1 day or the 2 day? Unfortunately, there's nothing you can't do. It is smiling and say, I hope you feel better. I look forward to seeing you back as soon as you can come back to work. And that is a big frustration with every employer with PSSL time, is that you can't do anything with those first 3 days. It is what it is. Unless they've exhausted their PSSL time, then you have an opportunity to address it, but not when they're using the time. It's protected. Paid
That-
family.
Let me ask, I want to clarify for me and the audience. We talk about PTO, paid time off, and I
Yeah.
see companies lump it. Well, that includes your vacation and your sick pay and da 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 da. Is that all right?
It's all right, but it's problematic. And the reason why, and we tell this to our clients all the time, is the reason why is so the law sees PSSL and PTO the same. Vacation time is separate and apart, and we can still do whatever we want with vacation time. It's the sick time that the law has requirements and regulations. So PTO is a combination between sick and vacation time. And you don't know which hours are for sick and which hours are for vacation because it's all combined. That's why the law applies to PTO. And so it makes it complicated. We certainly are encouraging clients going back to the old school way of having a paid sick and safe leave policy that's in compliance with the law. And then you have a vacation policy that you can do whatever you want with. You have two separate ones. And it's because one, again, the vacation you can do whatever you want with. You can cap it. You can, pay out whatever you want. But then you can just follow the letter of the law with your PSSL and your PTO time. Combining the two, you're going to always have to comply with the law. And it can be problematic. It's lawful. It's definitely lawful. But there's a lot of problems with it. And you can't track it. You cannot track that time as you do when you separate the two. So it's something to think about. It's something to really ponder and think about and talk to, us or an employment attorney about, how it's structured. But I would say that continues to be the most challenge, the most frustration for most employers.
Are there any laws that say a company has to offer a certain amount of sick leave time?
Yeah, the paid sick and safe leave law.
How many hours?
Well,
you accrue
it. So it's 1 hour for every 40 hours worked.
Okay, so that's what.
Seattle,
okay.
And of course, Seattle then has their own law because they have to be special.
Yeah,
So,
I had a client, and he owned a staffing agency in the dental industry.
oh,
And that I was not sure this was the same as but he told me that the dental hygienists and assistants and that were doing, they want to just do staffing work part-time when they wanted to work, etc. Yeah. Figured that out real quick. Once they got to their 8 hours, they would call them like at 6 a.m. and say, "Not coming in today. I'm sick. I'm taking my sick pay." They'd earned their 8 hours, and they were getting paid for the day.
Right. Well, and so the truth of it is, so employees, this is where they're getting clever. If you just call in sick for the day, yeah, you're going to have to give it to them. You can't say prove it that you're sick. But an employee who's saying, you know what, I've met my 8 hours, I'm just going to use my sick time. Actually, then they're not using the sick time the way it was designed by law. And so
they didn't say that. They said, "I'm sick." They figured it out.
Yeah, and you're up the creek without a paddle with that one. So
Suzan, this has been great. Let's finish up on all the discrimination and that. I'm going to give you a quick story about a client of mine and friend, and he had a lady who was definitely underperforming at work. And she, as I recall, he said she had 5 categories. It was age, gender, she's gay, she had former drug problem, and some kind of disability. He worked for 6 months or more with his employment attorney, documenting absolutely everything she did on the job that wasn't up to standards before he could do anything. So talk about discrimination and retaliation and all of that.
It's a big thing. And first of all, I just want to say, you got to train your managers, your employees, at least your managers, your bare minimums of managers on what discrimination, retaliation, and harassment is, because it's a it's a defined law, and you need to know what is and isn't and what you can and can't do. But yeah, anytime we start, so we do a lot of investigations. We do attorney-led investigations with clients, and that we always start with, how is this employee protected? and we walk through the list and we're asking them, are they over 40? Are they, in a protected class? Are they a person of color? Are they, Hispanic? We always are writing all this down. Do they have a disability? And it's even, a lot of times it's known or should have known. So maybe the employee never told you they had a disability, but because they exhibited it in some way, you should have known. So, if I'm sitting here and my hair, I have no hair and I have a scarf on, and I never told you I had cancer, but the appearance is that I have cancer, then again, that's a perceived disability. And under the Washington law against discrimination, I'm protected, even though I didn't tell you. So we find that, that the employer is just, they're so set on wanting a employee to do things their way and meet their performance standards that they're not understanding the various laws of the lands that provide protection for these people and the accommodation process that you have to go through. So, and you do have to go through an accommodation. So if an employee comes to you and says, hey, well, please know, first and foremost, that the pregnant woman is the most protected person in Washington state. But let's say you have a pregnant woman who is a greeter. Let's say, they're not a Walmart or anything like that. I don't want to do that. But you have your own store and it's non-union, and this pregnant woman's a greeter and she would like to have a stool to sit on because standing there is too long. This would also work for somebody who's, over 40, maybe 50 or so, and they have back problems and they want a stool. And you say no because you don't think that looks professional. You don't think that's good. That's not the greeting you want your clients to have or customers to have when they walk in the door. I can tell you that the EEOC would say that is a reasonable accommodation. You need to provide them with a stool. I mean, it's like no argument. And part of what the EEOC is a little frustrated with employers on is that they don't go through the due diligence process or the interactive process to find out what the accommodation is that their employees looking for and the reasons why. They just immediately go, you want a stool? No, that's not the look we want, instead of having an interactive conversation pursuing why. So that probably is one of the bigger problems we have with disabilities. In regards to discrimination, it's employers putting their head in the sand. Their people are coming to them and saying, this person's using this racial slur, this person's making these sexual comments, they think it's a joke, they're not. And the employer, because it does take a lot of work, they just put their head in the sand. And it's like, just tell them to be quiet, just ignore them. The law requires you to have a zero tolerance policy and be compliant with that, and take whatever reasonable steps you can to cease the discrimination, retaliation, or harassment from continuing. You have to make sure you stop it. And that usually involves an investigation. But we find more and more employers, managers, it's mostly managers, they just don't want to deal with it. And so they wave it off. And that actually is unlawful. So,
okay. So let me back up a little bit and tie it to the job posting requirements. If you post on a job that you will be standing at the door during your shift, or you will be standing at the assembly line to make these, or at the CNC machine, or behind the counter at Dick's Drive-In, does that cover any of this?
It certainly helps. But if you have a person of disability asking for an accommodation to be made, meaning an exception, the first thing that the employer has to look at is it, and this is why you want job descriptions, good job descriptions that separates essential job duties and responsibilities versus non-essential. Okay, so you want to have that separated on an actual job description. And that's why we have job descriptions created before, because you don't create it when a person comes and asks, because it looks retaliatory, right? You want to have something in place. And every year on January 1, you review your job descriptions and updates them. That's what the law would like to see. And I'm not saying requiring, I'm saying like. Anyway, so it says this on the job description, and the question is whether it's an essential job responsibility and duty, or is it not? I could tell you how you just described having that stool there. That's not an essential job responsibility. If you can prove that the job can be done either way, with or without accommodation, then it's not an essential job responsibility. It's more likely non-essential. The employer is not required to change essential job duties, but they are for non-essential. But anything that they've listed as essential, they need to prove why that's an essential piece of the job. So, let's use in our receptionists again. Receptionists, again, making this up at the high level, they why do we have a receptionist? Probably because we need somebody to greet people when they come in the door and to answer the phones. We add making coffee, getting the mail and distributing it. We add those functions because, hey, they need other things to do besides answering the phone and greeting the client when they walk in the door. But when it comes to a essential job duty, we go back to why the position was created. And there's no way that you could say, well, you can greet. We need somebody at the door to greet clients. Well, that's reasonable. Yeah, you want somebody to be there to greet clients when they walk in the door. We can't take that job responsibility away. The phone, we might nowadays, because of how phone systems is set up and it can be transferred to other people. But greeting the client when they walk in the door, we need actually a person there to do it. And that's a reasonable essential job duty that you can accommodate, and don't have to. Hopefully I made it sense. This is where it gets complicated, but hopefully I made that using that example that made sense.
Well, if you go to my little example of Dick's, and it could be McDonald's or Jimmy John's or anything, and someone says, well, you put in there, you will be behind the counter for this many hours on your shift. Someone says, well, I can't stand for 3 hours straight without a break. Well, maybe the job's not for you.
Well, actually, no. What would the OC would want you to do is, okay, you need to prove that having a stool there doesn't work. So you bring the employee in and you give them the stool and you see how efficient they are. Are they meeting the efficiency requirements? Are they able to reach and, take checks and money and all that? You have to show that you gave it a try. Therefore, that's why it doesn't work. And this is where you really need attorneys to be able to oversee that, because they're the best ones to tell you whether or not it's a reasonable accommodation or not. Or, if the essential job duty is really an essential job duty. That's really for an attorney to decide, not an HR professional such as myself.
Well, thank you, Susan. Here's my closing comments. If anybody thinks they know the majority of stuff going on within HR and employee employment laws and rules, regulations, I'd say there's a 99% chance that they're missing something, and probably something important. It is just, you're describing a maze that takes an experienced guide to get through that maze, to get out safely on the other end without any employee problems.
Absolutely. So. And I appreciate you recognizing that, John. I greatly appreciate that. And I just want to say that's why I always feel bad for the person who was receptionist, who was promoted to the HR manager. That promotion does not set up that person for success. They need to know too, there's so much there. Not that they can't be there in 5 years or so, but it's complicated. It definitely is complicated.
So tell us how people can get hold of you and All Things HR.
You can visit our website, All Things HR, at allthings-hr.com. That's our website. And they don't confuse us with the All Things HR that's in Australia. We won't be able to help you if you reach out to that firm. But we are here to talk to you, to ask you questions about your business needs. We also have an HR help desk that's available 9 to 4 Monday through Friday. And, happy to be your partner in regards to HR issues, concerns. We coach, we mentor, we do the work. We just want to help you achieve the better HR department that you're looking for.
Well, thank you so much. This was a long and very interesting discussion because there's so many traps in this field.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. Well, thank you
thank
for having me. It was a pleasure.
you are welcome. And I know that people are going to get a lot of benefit from this. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
There we go.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hopefully I did